Now for Global Business Updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Abati. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Good morning, all our viewers out there. I'll begin with U.S. President Trump. He says that he wants to expedite the review of tariffs, basically with the Supreme Court. So documents that have been seen by some outlets suggest that he wants the Supreme Court to review what the appeals court loss that he got just last week, Friday, and the prior U.S. Courts of International Trade that was back in May or so. He wants that reviewed by November. Ordinarily, according to the trajectory of time, they wouldn't actually look at this until next year sometime. So he wants them to review it as quickly as possible in November, and he wants a decision. He was speaking, he had the president of Poland in the White House. I have a quote from President Trump. He was talking to reporters, and he said this. He said, if we don't win that case, our country is going to suffer so greatly. The deals are already done. I guess we'd have to unwind them. I remember Rufai was saying he doesn't have much confidence in the Supreme Court, but hey, the International Court of Trade has ruled on this, appeals court of trade. Will the Supreme Court, reverse that? Who knows? Maybe because of all the deals that are out there. Scott Bessent, Dr. Abati mentioned this yesterday as well, as Scott Bessent has written to the court saying, look, there are a number of deals that are out there. If you unwind this thing, this is going to be trouble. But we'll see what happens. It looks like the Supreme Court could expedite this as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, the counsel for the businesses that brought the case to courts, and also some Democratic states, Jeffrey Schwab, he also responded to what happened. He said, the government has now asked the U.S. Supreme Court to review this case. Both federal courts, he's referring to appeals courts and the U.S. Court of International Trade, that considered the issue, agreed that AIPA, Economic Emergency Powers Act, does not give the president unchecked tariff authority. He's a senior counsel with the Liberty Justice Center representing the small businesses and some of those states that brought the case forward. Then he now said that, look, Liberation Day is legal, and he's confident that the Supreme Court will see the case in their favor. He said these unlawful tariffs are inflicting serious harm on small businesses because they are taxes and jeopardizing their survival. We hope for a prompt resolution of this case for our clients. So again, we will see how this turns out. I think moving on, we're going to go to Apple, I believe. One more quote from him. That's what I think it was I just said. We are confident that our legal argument against the so-called Liberation Day tariffs will ultimately prevail. So it's all up in the air. Meanwhile, Bloomberg is reporting that Apple is planning a AI-backed web search tool that is supposed to overhaul Siri, which has been quite disappointing as far as AI is concerned. They're calling it some world knowledge answers. Google, of course, could be behind the foundational technology on this. They basically want to compete with the Perplexities and the OpenAIs on this world. Apple will be releasing new items at their annual showcase, I think next on the 9th or so. Meanwhile, I'm not sure if I clarified this yesterday. I just want to go back to the court case from yesterday with Judge Amit Mehta. Because I remember I said that Google, the case where they said they didn't have to sell off Chrome. I think I said that they no longer have exclusive deals with partners for Chrome. However, I think what I left out is that they can still keep up their payments to companies like Apple that they have existing partnerships with. So it says, cutting off payments from Google almost certainly will impose substantial, in some cases, crippling downstream harms to distribution partners, related markets, and consumers, which counts against a broad payment. So they can still keep up those payments. And by the way, Apple shares climbed yesterday, as did Google. Apple shares closed up 3.81%. Google's shares, as far as Alphabet Class A shares, they were up about 9%. In trading yesterday. I think we'll move to Africa. Yeah, Alphabet Class A, they were up about 9.9%. So the markets were really relieved that this they didn't have to sell off Chrome. I think we'll go to Ethiopia. Yes, the governor of Mahmoud Miret, if I get his name correctly, he's resigned after just a couple of years in office. This is the National Ethiopian Bank, the NSB. He's after 2 years in office. He says he's moving on to other things, but this gentleman has really put in some reforms in Ethiopia. So he was appointed early 2023. Ethiopia, can you imagine, it's only just 2024 that they were establishing an interest rate-based monetary policy system where they're actually going to have an established benchmark rate. They've opened banking to foreign lenders. They had so foreign banks can actually have subsidiaries in Ethiopia. They're doing the same thing in telecoms as well. And they floated the birr, which is their local currency, unlocked about $10.5 billion from the World Bank and the IMF. Ethiopia still has a lot of issues, insecurity, a lot of widespread poverty, and so on. But these reforms have really put the country in the right direction as far as their monetary policy and fiscal side as well is concerned. Pretty reminiscent to Nigeria. And I think finally, in Ghana, inflation has decelerated now for an 8th month in a row. Headline now is at 11.5. July was 12.1. 4-year low. MPR, they cut their benchmark rate by 300 basis points in July. Next meeting, funny enough, is the same date as the Federal Reserve meeting. That's what we have as far as our updates for today.
Rotus, I'd like to talk about Scott Bessent this morning. He talks a lot of rubbish, with due respect.
Yeah.
I mean, Dr. Abati brought up a point yesterday that he made, that when he was saying if the judgment does not go their way, he will invoke Smoot-Hawley.
Right.
Smoot-Hawley's act that had been repealed. And I remember, I think once he said that thing, I said, Scott Bessent is so funny when he says that, because Smoot-Hawley's act has been repaired. It was in 1930 when you had the Smoot-Hawley's Act. It was after the Fordney Act of the late 1920s. Then afterwards, the Smoot-Hawley Act. Then in 1934, the act was repealed. In fact, it was after repealing the Smoot-Hawley's Act with another act that they gave the president of the country the leverage to be able to go ahead and impose tariffs.
Yeah.
It was in 1934 Act. So why is Bessent cutting Smoot-Hawley? As a way to be able to go? Because you see, these guys, they look for a lot of angles that are not even there in the first place.
Yeah.
And they have just caused a lot of problems for the American economy. Let's see how the appeal court through. But I don't, like I said before.
Yeah, you don't think the Supreme Court.
These were the names I was trying to mention. The Supreme Court, where you have a Brett Kavanaugh, Coney Barrett, you have a Neil Gorsuch. I don't think they're I'm not confident about them.
I think even the tone of President Trump asking for a quick review from the Supreme Court in itself is cast a little bit of doubt in terms of the fairness, objectivity of the Supreme Court that's largely controlled by him. So let's see how that works out. But I think with regards to Apple, because we talked about the story yesterday, the Google side of things, but Apple now innovating, especially playing in the AI space. This is long overdue.
Yeah.
Siri is only able to answer very basic questions. They've been lagging behind, because of the emergence of ChatGPT and other AI-empowered services like that. And according to their stats, in the last 1 year, they've had reduced number of people who are searching using the Apple platform. So, of course, this is a matter of survival. If they're going to survive as a tech company in the next few years, they're going to innovate. They're going to need to employ AI. The only thing I would like to know is what would they do differently from ChatGPT?
Right.
Because you yourself admitted that you hardly use, you use Google search, you use ChatGPT. So I'd like to see what, in terms of technology would be employed to stand them out from ChatGPT. But in good news, like you mentioned, their stocks have gone high. People are quite, optimistic about this new move.
Okay, the markets this morning. The U.S. markets mostly climbed.
Yeah.
S&P 500 particularly, and then the NASDAQ composite, flying on the back of the tech stocks. Doing very well, particularly with the federal court ruling that, Google does not have to sell Chrome, but it can share.
Yeah.
And that also affected the markets in the Asia Pacific, in South Korea, in Japan, Nikkei 225. It's only in Hong Kong, Hang Seng Index, and in mainland China, CSI 300, that you have, some kind of negative performance at the end of trading. Now, that's not about that. The other issue is President Trump trying to influence the Supreme Court of the United States.
Yes.
Now, the earliest time that the Supreme Court can hear the appeal and conclude on it will be June 2026. Now he's saying that the Supreme Court should act very quickly on the issue of tariffs that was decided by the lower court. So that's the issue. Scott Bessent, whatever he says, what is urgent right now is whether the Supreme Court will hear the matter immediately or not.
Yeah.
Well, U.S. also, maybe perhaps in response to what happened at the SCO and the military parade, the World War II demonstration of military might of China.
Yeah.
Now says chip makers in the U.S., their waiver has been
revoked.
From
like
December 2025, they can no longer, have that waiver, that free trade waiver, that accelerated waiver with China. And that will affect Hynix, it will affect TSMC, it will also affect Samsung, which are the three major companies, that export semiconductors to China. So those are the big major issues. You said something about Ethiopia?
Yes,
right?
yes.
The central bank. Yeah. The major issue here is under that particular gentleman, he talked about the independence of the central bank. The independence of the central bank that Trump does not want, that other world leaders do not want, and which, the EU central bank, Christine Lagarde, says will be a threat to global economy.
Indeed.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rotus.
Thank you.
Well,